Coming up on Tech News Weekly, controlling a human being via the internet on Halloween. Also translating smart thermometer data into signals for medicine marketing. A whole bunch of new Apple hardware that we're going to dive into. And that's right, the holiday shopping season just began. Are you ready? All that and more coming up next on Tech News Weekly.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 56, recorded Thursday, November 1st, 2018.
This episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by DigitalOcean, the easiest cloud platform to deploy, manage, and scale applications. Over 150,000 businesses rely on DigitalOcean to remove infrastructure friction and deliver industry-leading price performance. Sign up today and receive a free $100 credit at do.co/twit.
And by LastPass, secure every password-protected entry point to your business. Join over 43,000 businesses and start managing and securing your company's passwords today. Learn more at lastpass.com/twit.
Welcome to Tech News Weekly. This is a show where we talk to the people making and breaking the tech news. I'm Megan Maroney.
I'm Jason Howell. So what do we start with, making or breaking?
I think making.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like we
Yeah, let's start with a maker of tech news.
Right.
This week, of course, was Halloween, and among the trick-or-treating and sexy everything costumes, some MIT researchers set out to do something really scary by allowing anyone in the internet to suggest and control the actions of a complete stranger. It's called the BeeMe project. And today we're joined by Niccolo Pescetelli, who studies collective intelligence at the MIT Media Lab. And he's here to tell us how it all went. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Hi, Megan.
So first, explain a little bit about the project itself.
Yeah. So BeeMe is about checking if, as a collective online, we can sort of coordinate in real time to achieve complex goals, like, for example, coordinating a character into a story and moving the character through the storyline.
And so the character was an actor, not a real person. You weren't putting a real person through the internet's wishes, correct?
Well, that's what we told the press, but actually there were like two people in our team who offered themselves as the actors.
Are they still
brave.
with us?
One is right in front of you speaking.
Okay. So you're not a trained actor?
I did a lot of acting during my high school years, and I loved acting, but no, I'm not a professional actor.
So what were the goals of the project?
So the goals of the project is seeing whether groups of people online can establish real-time cooperation and coordination on complex games. We have seen cooperation online for decades, like Wikipedia, Reddit are all examples of cooperation and curation of knowledge, for example, over time by many users. What we don't know if the same can happen in real time under time pressure, and if basically the crowd can adapt to the environment, to a ever-changing environment and new problems. So that's what we wanted to test with this experiment.
I mean, and you had this all mapped out. It's covering a large space. If you end up kind of watching the video, you can actually go to YouTube and you can watch kind of some of the playthrough or walkthrough, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of hard to know. It's kind of a video game, but kind of real life. But it's expansive, right? It covers a large map. What were some of the rules? Like, I'm sure there were rules put in place that people could and should not instruct the human to do. What were some of those rules?
Yeah, so we had ground rules and game rules. So the game rules were extremely simple. Just suggest your command, try to upvote and downvote other people's commands, and try to move on in the story and complete the mission. The ground rules were there in place to basically avoid bad things to happen. So there was a rule of safety. Everybody should be never put in danger. There was a rule of lawfulness, where, of course, no criminal activity should be ever made, and then respect. We didn't want anybody to feel uncomfortable at any time, and this includes the actors, the bystanders that had to interact with the actors, the users from home as well.
And so there was a backstory as well, right? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we came up with a sort of eerie sci-fi mystery. So the story goes that a sort of secret corporation called Spam Church has developed the first and most powerful AGI, or artificial general intelligence, to date. But unfortunately, this AGI has escaped and has been released accidentally online, and is now in the process of making copies of itself and debugging its own sort of code and the rules that humans have put in its code. This process will take time. And so these two heroes from the Wisdom program, which is this secret organization of scientists that tries to merge collective and artificial intelligence, these two heroes are deployed to stop anything bad from happening.
So I'm really curious to hear, we're taking a look at kind of the interface that last night was lit up and moving. Today it's kind of in a standstill for the most part. The project is over, but I'm curious to hear a little bit about how the technology aspect, which is this interface that people are voting on what the human does, how is that translated and communicated to the human? Like at what point? Is it 100 votes to jump and the human, gets something in their ear that says, all right, it's time for you to jump, and they jump?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we took inspiration from Reddit and from IRL streaming. So IRL streaming is very popular at the moment in real time, in real life streaming, where basically users can see a live streaming of their favorite YouTube star, and then can, for a little bit of money, they can suggest commands, and simply a voice-to-text or text-to-speech algorithm simply relays that to the streamer. We wanted to include the element of collective intelligence into it, and that's where like this upvoting and downvoting kind of Reddit style comes in. So users suggested commands, and by upvoting and downvoting them in real time, we had this sort of constantly updating ranking of commands, and the system had on the back end like a discounting algorithm where basically recent commands were sort of facilitated to go to the top, because exactly this time pressure, this element of timeliness was extremely important. You can imagine somebody giving the best command, but if it's 2-3 minutes too late, then it's a very bad command. And the system simply gives the first command to the actor, and when the actor executes the command, that command is marked as done, and the next one comes in.
So I think of collective intelligence, naming boats, Bodie McBoatface, for example, or just like the old adage, too many cooks spoil the broth. So I've always assumed that collective intelligence is not as smart. Is that accurate?
This is like a century-old and even more conversation. We have examples for both. So sometimes together we create outstanding things. Some other times we collectively fail. In general, I believe it's a matter of design. Ultimately, collective intelligence is about how we share information. What you know, how is it integrated with what I know, and that's why designing the technological infrastructure that allows for an optimal sharing of information is critical for this intelligence to emerge.
What, I mean, there's a lot going on here from a technical standpoint. There's a lot of places that this could kind of fall apart. What would you say was the biggest technical challenge in executing this when you've got that many people participating and all of this communication happening back to you or whoever, you know, the other human was? What was the biggest technological hurdle, the technical aspect?
Yeah, it was like a very complex operation involving like many people, and of course the two actors. And the digital infrastructure was already tested several times. And a few days before the event, we decided to expand our server capacity due to the wide media exposure. And so we were ready like for more than 10,000 users. And that estimation was fairly accurate. We stayed below that cap, but still in 40 minutes we got more than 7 million requests, and that means that if you do the math, this is like something like 7,000 requests per user. So a request is a simple interaction with the interface. It could be an upvote, a downvote, a command suggestion. Wow. And so this number seems a bit too high to me. We will investigate if there was any, bot or malicious intent behind. But yeah, we had some technical issues, particularly at the very beginning.
So the big question on your site was, how does it feel to be the internet? And so can you answer that, since you were the person? How did it feel to be the internet?
It's amazing. I really felt this thousand of people like behind me, sort of inspiring me, the actions inspiring me how to interact with my environment. I cannot say that all the actions were sensible. Some were very outlandish, but overall nobody misbehaved, and there was like a very positive feeling in the room.
Yeah, it kind of ties into kind of one of my questions, which is kind of your faith in humanity. When given the option to advise a human to do anything, I mean, at the end of the day, it sounds like things were relatively tame. I mean, you had the rules in place, thankfully, but does it give you faith in humanity?
I have endless faith in humanity. Absolutely. I also was extremely, safe, because I had all my collaborators monitoring the activity from behind the scenes and flagging anything that was too dangerous or inappropriate on time.
Right.
So I know this was only last night, but are there any preliminary learnings or anything from this project so far?
One thing that I can say is that I was very surprised to see at the very end where the evil AI finally manages to get in touch with this with the two actors and reveals that he has basically hijacked the whole communication system from the very beginning, and offers the actors or like the two characters a final choice to join the AI. I expected, like from expectations from game theory and traditional economic thinking, people to defect, so to sort of turn their back against each other. And actually, there was an incredible amount of cooperation, and the two crowds basically decided to save humanity rather than going to the dark side. So that was extremely pleasant to see.
So what's the next project?
We don't know yet. Maybe next Halloween, but definitely we would like to expand BeeMe, improve the interface, and gather the feedback of the users. That it's extremely valuable to us, and hopefully it will be who knows, a new form of entertainment, both for the science and for the fun.
That's great.
Niccolo Pescetelli is a postdoctoral associate at the Scalable Cooperation Group at the MIT Media Lab and one of the creators of the BeeMe project. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. And as if that last story wasn't Black Mirror enough for you, the New York Times reports that ad targeting is getting sneakier this flu season. An internet-connected thermometer is selling information about your family's body temperature to Clorox so they can sell you more Clorox wipes when you have a fever. Joining us to discuss this story is the writer who reported it for the New York Times, Sapna Maheshwari. Welcome back to the show, Sapna.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about how this ad targeting works.
Sure. So basically, the pitch of this data is that it gets you one step closer to the health data, the illness data, than typing in a Google search or tweeting that you might have the flu. So basically, it's a thermometer, and you take your temperature as you would if you're not feeling well, except you have paired it with a smartphone app, and it's tracking your temperature for you, and you can input your symptoms.
So Clorox is getting your temperature, and what else? What other information do they get?
So the big thing is that it's paired to your zip code. And so the company Kinsa has said that there's no identifying information. They say aggregate it to the zip code level. So basically what Clorox is getting is information that shows where there might be more fevers. And they then use that to automatically target ads through programmatic buys. So very automated, very mousetrap-like.
I feel like I'm so used to hearing companies say, yeah, but the data that we have contains no personally identifiable information. And then there being studies later that prove that that's untrue. But I mean, it sounds like in this case, like at the macro level, it's zip code or is there any reason we should doubt what they're saying here as far as that's concerned? I'm left with enough doubt from previously been stung by this.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, it's a new area, I think, for sure, in which to be sharing this. The company itself says that they have a public health mission. And so they're saying they're not allowing companies to target individuals or to target kids in the house, that kind of thing. But a lot of what they're saying in that regard is their own guidelines. So it, of course, raises the question, well, what about if a less ethical company makes a smart thermometer? Like, it's to be seen.
Right.
I mean, what is really the benefit for connecting my thermometer to my phone?
That's never the right question, Megan. Everything should be connected, but yes.
Well, so one interesting thing we've seen is this thermometer has been handed out in schools where families have 4 kids or more. And that's probably helpful for those parents if they're keeping track of a bunch of little kids and maybe, have a health issue or maybe they just want to keep an eye on the kids in that way. I am not a parent, and so I don't know if that would be helpful, but it seems like that's a big pitch. They've been handing it out in schools, and they're also saying, maybe you could see at your own school if fevers are on the rise.
I have all the thermometers I had when my kids were younger. I don't have one now, and for many years I just didn't even have one. And this worked on their forehead for me, and it wasn't connected to anything.
Yeah, it's one of those things that really makes you kind of, I think, do a bit of a double take with the word smart, which I think we've been doing a little bit more of in the past few years and definitely will going forward. I mean, this is something you find at the local pharmacy. And I think more and more we're just going to have to ask, as more random household devices become smart, what is their business model? What are they pitching to marketers? And how might we inadvertently been sharing things we just had no clue we were sharing?
Man, this just keeps happening. More and more stories come along where you're just like, okay, obviously, like ethically speaking, they're probably crossing a line here that a lot of people would feel uncomfortable with. Technically speaking, it sounds like they've got some protections in place. Saying that it's zeroed in on the zip code level. I mean, technically would give them the pass, I think, in some people's minds. But if companies can't be trusted to kind of follow their ethical boundaries from an ethical standpoint, does that then once again point to kind of regulation around this sort of stuff? What do you think?
It's another example of one of those things where it feels like the regulatory process and laws and guidelines are so slow when you see something like this introduced onto the market. So, I mean, you would hope it does raise a conversation around ethics and potentially rules down the road. But right now, it kind of feels like it's way beyond where lawmakers even kind of understand where things are right now. What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, the reason I ask that is because I feel like we've pigeonholed ourselves with technology, and more we're kind of seeing the kind of the outcome of that. Where for as long as I've been focused on tech, the drive has always been make everything smarter, faster. Computers and everything, and this is going to be a wonderful, lovely place. But then at some point, we started to realize, well, yeah, in order to make these things as smart and capable and useful as we thought we needed to, that also does carry with it this requirement of passing this data that you may or may not feel comfortable passing along. So, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think the problem is a lot larger than maybe regulation would have the the speed to deal with at the rate things are snowballing right now. It's just a difficult point in technology right now. People want the best of all worlds, and you can't have this without giving away all of your data. And how do you feel about that? I guess that's, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, one of the things that made me think about too was, of course, people are buying this thermometer, but there's still this data, component of their business clearly. And so, more and more we're seeing that old saying, if it's free, you're the product. Yeah. I mean, it's increasingly becoming like, you may pay for the product, but it's still tracking you. We saw that with smart TVs this summer. Even something like Peloton, it's not, as far as I know, it's not selling your data, but once you buy this expensive bike, you're still paying $38 to $39 a month to get the videos to work out with it. It just seems like software is creating this kind of dual, I guess, revenue stream business models.
Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't be surprised if Peloton also was selling your data. I mean, that's someone who's willing to pay that much for a bike. I mean, not your exercise data, but like you're probably on some kind of mailing list as being someone with a lot of money if you buy a Peloton.
Right.
I mean, I haven't proven that, but I guess if they really have the public health in mind, then that's what I think makes me uneasy about this, because, I get like Google tracks flu data, and I'm all for that data and the idea that like if a lot of people in a certain neighborhood have high temperatures, then, it'd be a good idea to start disinfecting things, but they're not necessarily doing that. I mean, I guess they are, like they see that as sending advertisements or coupons for Clorox wipes as a public health benefit to you, but it really does seem like, because like you said, you've already bought this product and then they're targeting you for ads. That's what I feel like is making me uneasy about this.
Right. I mean, and it's a hard thing because like you said, it could be great and there could be this great public health mission, but at the end of the day, it is a business. It's a company that's raised $29 million from really prominent VCs, and it's also important to keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. So what about the patent application? You also have a part in your piece about Amazon applying for a patent that can detect when you've been coughing?
Yeah, and credit to CNET for getting that. That's the first place that I had seen it. So Amazon applied for a patent that basically could read into your voice and potential sniffling to help tailor their answers to you. So if you make a request, they might suggest, chicken soup or offer to get cough drops. And so again, kind of reading into the health and then essentially trying to sell you something.
Well, Sapna, thank you so much for joining us. Sapna Maheshwari is a business writer at the New York Times. You can find this piece as well as stories about the power of Google, Instagram, and others. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Sapna. All right, coming up, Apple had a bunch more new hardware to show off this week. Its second event. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by DigitalOcean. DigitalOcean provides the easiest cloud platform to deploy, manage, and scale applications with Droplets, virtual machines that are a scalable compute platform with add-on storage, security, and monitoring capabilities. You can choose from standard or CPU-optimized droplets and customize from there. DigitalOcean is designed for developers. They have an easy-to-use control panel and an API that lets developers spend more time coding and less time managing their infrastructure. Industry-leading price to performance as well. You can access the compute resources that you need at the lowest rates, saving up to 55% compared to other cloud providers. And you'll always know what you'll pay per month with a flat pricing structure across all data center regions. And a whole bunch of things included at no additional cost. You're going to get 99.99% uptime SLA, cloud firewalls, monitoring and alerting, full DNS management, global data centers, enterprise SSDs, and an easy-to-use API. Over 150,000 businesses, including some of the world's fastest-growing startups, rely on DigitalOcean, and that's to remove infrastructure friction and deliver industry-leading price performance. So you can sign up today and receive a free $100 credit. Just go to do.co/twit. That's do.co/twit for a free $100 credit. And we thank DigitalOcean for their support. Apple has so much new stuff, it can't possibly show it off on one event. And with some pretty major updates to a few key products, we thought we'd bring in Bradley Chambers from 9 to 5 Mac to talk all about them. Welcome to the show, Bradley.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Awesome. It's great to get you here. We appreciate it. So before we get to all of that hardware, the new hardware, which event would you say spoke to you more? The iPhone event not too long ago or this Monday's Everything Else event? What do you think?
I mean, the iPhone event, certainly that's Apple's, kind of key permit of the event of the year. I actually really missed the Macworld events in January. I'm sure a lot of your listeners remember those when they used to announce products in January. Mm-hmm. And I really missed those. The iPhone event is always exciting. This was a great event as well. But yeah, that summer iPhone event is always the fun one for me.
Well, instead it's all condensed into like a few. I mean, Apple knows how to like dominate the news cycle, so they do it very well. And obviously this is probably one reason why, the stacked events. So let's I guess start with some of the items that they talked about. The MacBook Air, it got a big bump. Retina display finally, yay! But boo to the butterfly keys. I am not a big fan of the butterfly keys. What's your take on this Air refresh?
Yeah, so the MacBook Air, I mean, in the tech community, it gets really pandered. Yeah. But I spent last week in Minneapolis at the Jamf Nation User Conference, and Jamf is I would say the largest Apple-only mobile device management company, and I guess in the world. And they announced that SAP had chosen Jamf to manage their thousands and thousands and thousands of Apple devices. And I could almost bet you every one of their Macs are MacBook Airs. That's, people say, why are they still selling this? It's like that device sells like hotcakes to students and to enterprises. Mm-hmm. And there's a couple of reasons. Number one, it has USB-A. Number two, it's very dependable from a hardware perspective. And number three, it was affordable. And so that's been, I would say, their best-selling laptop. Tim kind of mentioned that customers love the MacBook Air. And they really do. Like, yes, it was very much a compromised device. The screen was terrible in retrospect. But it reminds me a lot of the old MacBook Pro that they sold for years that had the DVD drive with the terrible screen. College students bought that like crazy. And so, yeah, it's the MacBook Air, the new one, I'm really excited about. The keyboard, I mean, it's not my favorite, but at this point, as long as it doesn't break when I eat food around it, I'll take it. I mean, the Retina screen, that's obviously great. Go into USB-C, it's a very much a problem. It's a short-term problem, I think. But if you really break it down, it's not about USB-C. It's about the fact they don't include an adapter. People in the Apple community have been buying dongles for years. My first Mac was the PowerBook G4, and that was a great Mac, by the way, the 12-inch. It included a mini DVI to VGA, a mini DVI to DVI in the box. And then when they switched over to Intel, they started selling adapters. And I think Apple would kind of negate a lot of consumer frustration if they would just include one USB-A to USB-C adapter in the box. But on the flip side, I'm just not plugging stuff up to my laptop that much. When I'm at work, I do a little bit, but like when I kind of think about a regular consumer, I'm not plugging stuff up to it. Yes, I do think it's probably hilarious that Apple's $1,500 iPhone doesn't include a USB-C cable to charge to these new Macs. But again, these are kind of a short-term problem. We'll get to USB-C, and then we'll forget about all this, and it's just going to take time. But now that all of the laptops across the board for Apple are USB-C, we hopefully should start seeing more peripherals that are USB-C native. But yeah, it's of course, one of the things people don't realize is they're actually still selling the old MacBook Air. They cut the price to $999, and I suspect it'll still sell well. But I think for enterprises, the security conscious people will especially lean towards this new one for the T2 chip. I think that if you're in banking or those type of industries, that new chip is really, really impressive.
So what do you recommend for students? I know that you work at a school, but it's a lower school. But like, what do you recommend for high school or any student that would be getting a Mac? Would you recommend the old MacBook Air, or would you recommend the new one, or would you say that's not necessarily enough power for what students are doing?
I think performance-wise, we got past the place where like what laptop you picked mattered years ago. And I'll talk more about this when we talk about the iPad, but everything has moved to the web. People aren't, if you're in college, you're not running high-end applications on your computer unless you're doing graphic design, which if that's the case, you probably need the MacBook Pro anyways. But if you just for your average college student that's going to English class, to math class, any of those computers are fine. I would probably say get the new one. It's got a nicer screen. It's not that much more money. And I always, when I'm talking to students, I say, look, get the very best computer you can afford and then use it until it falls apart. And I think if you only can afford the $999 MacBook Air, you could buy that today and get through 4 years of college, no problem. Yeah. But if you can afford a little bit more money and get the new one, it's just a nicer computer. It's just a great machine. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's really just a great computer. And yeah, I'll probably be buying at least 50 of these in the spring.
Just for yourself.
Baller.
Yeah, just for myself. Yeah, just for myself. I was really frustrated. I'm looking at a new Apple lease, and like 3 years ago when I was working on this, we got the MacBook Air again because I didn't like anything else that was on the market. And I was like, how are we still at this spot 3 years later where there was nothing else? I suspect what happened is Apple thought the MacBook would replace the MacBook Air, but they've just never been able to get the price and performance kind of there together. And I really don't understand why they're both still being sold, to be honest with you. To me, it's like you should have just, I don't know, it was like go back to have your consumer level laptop and your pro level. And right now they kind of got two consumer levels. I don't get it.
So with those 50 MacBook Airs that you said you're buying, are those for K through 8 students or teachers or?
Teachers. They're for teachers. Yeah. So I'll be buying, some dongles. I'm sure I kind of expected I think I'm going to end up spending $4,000 in dongles. But we've been buying those for years anyways. I mean, thankfully Amazon, you can get them usually pretty inexpensive. But we've been buying HDMI adapters for years. That's what I honestly really loved about the 2015 MacBook Pro, which is the one I'm on now. Gosh, it had all the ports you would need. It had HDMI, it had two USB-A, had two Thunderbolt, and it had an SD slot. It's like, that was perfect. But I know times have to change. Yeah. But I think getting two USB-Cs in the new MacBook Air is really, really important.
So you mentioned the iPad Pro, so we might as well talk about that, of course. I feel like I saw a lot of people raving about the new design anyways, the full screen design. Is that its biggest improvement, or what did you think about the iPad Pro?
I am as most dissatisfied with the iPad right now as I've ever been in its history. When the iPad first came out, it was what was so revolutionary about it? It was its form factor to price. How much? Do you guys remember how much it was?
No.
Do you remember Steve had this big thing and he had said $999? That's what every room thought it was at. And the keynote, it dropped his $499.
Right, exactly.
It was like this almost computer thing for $500.
Right.
And over the years, now again, they do have the lower end iPad, which to me is in some ways the better deal. But then they've got, the iPad Pro now starts at $799, and last year it was $649. My biggest disappointment with like Apple under Tim Cook is they really know how to raise prices ever so slightly every single year. And if you add, if you take that $799 iPad and then add the keyboard cover and then the pencil, you're at MacBook Air level territory.
Yeah.
And I know there are people that use the iPad full time for all their work, and that's great. I'm not one of those people, and a lot of people I talk to can't do that. The iPad's biggest problem has nothing to do with the hardware. The hardware stopped mattering with the iPad around iPad Air 2 time. Any time that they say, oh, this is the Geekbench score for this, it's better than the MacBook Pro. It's like, who cares? This reminds me of back in the 2000s when the Windows people would say, hey, you buy that Mac for $1,500, but my $500 PC can outperform it. Nobody cared, because if you wanted a Mac, you wanted a Mac, and you didn't care what it cost. So my problem with looking at the specs is, you know what? Yeah, the iPad may be faster than the MacBook Air, but you know what the MacBook Air can do? Run a full web browser. It can run a full Google Docs suite. The Google Docs apps on the iPad do more to sell Chromebooks than any advertisement that Google has ever done. And the number one problem with the iPad has nothing to do with the hardware. It's everything to do with mobile Safari. So I'm not buying a $1,200 iPad when I throw in all the accessories to get a mobile version of Safari. So until Apple can give us a full version of Safari on the iPad, it's a crippled device in my opinion. And if you told me I had to pick one portable device, like tablet-like device, to do all my work on, it would not be the iPad. It'd be the Google Pixel Slate, because at least it gives you a full web browser.
You should tell us how you really feel.
It's like, and it's like I'll see people like kind of say that on Twitter, and it's absolutely true. Yeah. And it's not a hardware problem. I mean, nothing about the iPad's problems is a hardware. It's all software. It's still running essentially the iPhone OS. Yes, we've added some split view things. Yes, we've added some multitasking. That's great. Give us a full web browser. Microsoft and Google have shown us that full operating systems can work with touch, and it's time for Apple to figure it out. I mean, how many devices do they expect us to buy? We got the watch, we've got the phone, we've got the tablet, we've got the computer. It's like, Apple used to always be the type of company that would try to end of life its products with its own products. And I don't feel like they're doing that. I feel like they're trying to enjoy the revenue of both of these products. Yeah. And again, you give me an iPad at $12.99 that can replace my Mac and be an iPad, I'm all in. But it's still drastically easier to do a lot of things on the Mac, and it's faster because it has a full web browser. And I have an article going up about this weekend for 9 to 5 Mac, but I'll give you kind of a preview. Steve Jobs got his wish when he killed Flash, right? He wrote that letter, Thoughts on Flash, and Flash is dead. But you know what that did? Is that made web apps good enough. Native apps don't matter as much anymore. Web apps are good enough for most people. We see that with Spotify. We see that with Slack. These are not native apps. These are essentially web apps running on Electron. And so while Apple got its wish because the world moved to HTML5, it, in my opinion, especially for the iPad, made native apps not matter as much.
Mm-hmm. So as an educator, I know a lot of people are not really talking about the Apple sessions. That was something that they dedicated a lot of time to. I wonder what you thought of them. Do they sound like real educational opportunities for kids and adults, or does that seem like more marketing, efforts to get people in the store to buy more stuff?
I think it's both. I mean, that's one of the advantages that Apple has in having the retail spots they do that really Google just doesn't have. And so they can really work with their customers to help them better use their products. And the better you can use the products, the more likely you are to replace them in the future. So I think it's great. I think it's a wise use of their space. My town still doesn't have an Apple store. And so I've got my iPhone 10 has got 1 day left of warranty, and I can't hardly hear out of it now. So they're sending me a new one. They actually, because I don't have an Apple store within 2 hours, they drop ship me a phone and I send mine back. But I think it's great. I mean, Apple stores are one of their biggest assets. And so I think they should certainly use them. And, the more you can get people in there, the more you can keep them in the ecosystem. I think that's valuable.
Wait, I thought you were in Chattanooga.
Yeah, we are. We don't have an Apple store within 2 hours.
No Apple store in Chattanooga, even with the Wi-Fi that you have?
Yeah, we have fastest internet in America. People say like it's one of the best cities to retire to, but yeah, the closest one is about an hour and 45 minutes south down in Atlanta. And I'm not driving 2 hours to have an iPhone swapped. We do have they said you could go to Best Buy. It's like, I just rather y'all send me one. I don't trust other people to work on my phones. It's like, give me the Apple store or give me death.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've said that.
But, I'll say I was in the Linux Mall, which is in Atlanta here recently. Of course, the Apple store is crazy. I mean, it makes me nervous to go in. They need 2 of them. But the Microsoft store was so crowded as well. And now this was right after they announced their new Surface laptops. They had Minecraft material everywhere. The Microsoft stores were crowded, and I was surprised.
Wow. Well, Bradley, this has been a lot of fun. Bradley Chambers, 9to5mac.com. Really appreciate you taking time to give us your thoughts on all the hardware. Yeah.
Hope you guys have a good night.
All right, we will. We'll have you back soon. We appreciate it. Thank you.
After the break, Halloween is over, and that means it's time to start thinking about the gifts for the geeks in your life. Lindsey Turrentine from CNET is here to tell us what we should be buying for our geeks and ourselves, the other geeks. But first, this episode of Tech News Weekly is brought to you by LastPass. Now, we know you're good at creating and securing your passwords, but what about the rest of the people in your company? What is your company doing to ensure passwords are being shared appropriately? LastPass Enterprise makes password sharing convenient for employees while keeping access to corporate data secure. It even allows for full customization of access, including the ability to set master password requirements, enable password resets, and restrict access when needed. Configure over 100 policies, access security reports, and create shared folders. You can organize database logins, SSH keys, software licenses, and business information. You can also protect your business with multi-factor authentication. With the LastPass Authenticator app, a verification button will pop up on an employee's phone to guarantee they're the only ones with access to their accounts. If credentials are compromised, the app ensures outsiders will not have access. The LastPass password generator makes it easy to use unique random passwords that employees do not have to remember, and they do not have to write them down on the little piece of paper that they hide sort of under the corner of their laptop, but like one little piece is sticking out of the corner, and so obviously that's a password, and that's the first place someone will look. Employees can log into LastPass with their Microsoft Active Directory credentials, so they truly only have one password to remember. Data is encrypted and decrypted at the device level. Data stored in the vault is kept secret, even from LastPass. From easy onboarding to password autofill, LastPass makes it easy for businesses to take control of passwords and reduce the threat of breach. And in iOS 12 and Android Pie, autofill functionality makes it easier for employees to seamlessly use LastPass across all their mobile devices. When you open an app or visit a mobile site, the keyboard itself will offer your username and password as an autofill option, even on those old iPads that don't have a full web browser. It's similar to what autocorrect looks like now. No more copying and pasting from your LastPass app. LastPass also offers LastPass Premium for personal use, LastPass Families for your entire family, and LastPass Teams for teams of 50 people or fewer. I love LastPass. I have been using it forever. I love that at TWIT we all use it. We all have to use it. And they give it to us also for all our personal stuff. So it's just really nice. It's a great company benefit if you have employees. Think about it. More than 16 million people trust LastPass, the #1 most preferred password manager. Learn more at lastpass.com/twit today. That's lastpass.com/twit to see which product is right for you.
Thank you, LastPass. All right. You may think it's too soon to start shopping for Christmas. And while you might actually be completely right in thinking that, CNET's editor-in-chief, Lindsey Turrentine, is here to tell you that you are living in a fantasy world. Welcome back to the show, Lindsey.
Hi, it's so good to be here.
It's awesome to get you back, Lindsey. Always great to get you on. So I will admit, I actually started shopping for Christmas last week. And Megan's heard me like, oh, yeah, I got this. Now I got this. Like 3 items so far, which I like to think means I'm getting it done sooner and in advance, but which I actually know deep down means I'm going to end up buying more by the time the holiday rolls around. Is this what retailers are banking on?
Well, I will start by saying I am really proud of you, Jason.
Oh, good.
Good job.
Thank you.
I don't think you're going to spend more. I think you're going to feel a little bit more relaxed as you move toward the holidays. But what retailers are counting on is it's starting about now, but especially in the weeks moving up to Thanksgiving, the heat is going to be on and people will start spending more and more as they approach Black Friday. That has become such a big deal that people feel like they have to get a head start and get a jump on Black Friday itself. So You are not alone in your I need to
good.
get going early. Although you might be missing the best deals by not waiting another week or two.
Well, I don't know. I have an app called Slick Deals that works really well for me as far as that's concerned. But you've probably heard of it. You guys have this holiday buyer's guide, so I'm sure you've heard of it. CNET actually just released its holiday buyer's guide literally like a couple of hours ago.
Yes.
Being a CNET alum myself, I know how tech crazy everyone gets there around the holidays. What are a few of the items that you're really excited about this season?
Well, I'm going to start by giving sort of a blanket recommendation, which is that if you have people in your life who still use wired headsets, and I know people feel really strongly about that, and there's some people like musicians who are going to keep using wired headsets for fidelity reasons, but for most normal people, if they do not have wireless headsets, buy them that now. And your options are just all over the place this year. So you can get a really decent pair of like Skull Candy wireless cans for $50. You can spend a lot more money than that if you want. You can buy AirPods, of course. You can buy wireless earbuds that are probably better than AirPods. We have tons of options in our guide, both in a collection of those and in all price points.
So we just got done talking about the Apple event this week and all the new products. And, of course, Apple released their earnings, which weren't so great. Are there Apple products on this list? Are you encouraging people to buy the new stuff, the phones or the iPads or the MacBook Airs?
Well, what's interesting is that when we talk about phones, the XR is actually the phone that we have been waiting for from Apple. If you are in that ecosystem and you want to stay in it and you've been looking for the best iPhone at the best price, it is that phone. So far, we are testing the heck out of it right now when it comes to battery life, but we are pretty impressed by that phone for the price that it is, and so we're recommending it. It's really hard to get a deal on Apple products at the holidays. Unlike many retailers, Apple just doesn't cut them. But our tip for finding deals on iPhones or any other Apple products if you're into it is to go through your carrier. If there's an Apple product that your carrier sells, so we're not talking about MacBooks here, but maybe iPads and definitely phones, go to your carrier because you could get lucky and find sort of a 2-for-1 deal if you add another line. We're seeing those this year. We haven't seen them in the past. It's a good time to shop on a family plan.
That's a good tip. And I mean, we're talking about smartphones, obviously. Apple phones in a different category for that very reason. They don't really go on sale very, very often. You're lucky if you find that. What about just smartphones in general? I feel like, I mean, as a tech, reviewer of phones, this time of year is just so chaotic because there's so many phones coming out. So usually I would tell people, all right, hold off until like they are out, and then you can make your decision. If people are planning on buying phones for the holidays, is now too early, or are we kind of beyond that point to where, okay, we know what we're getting now?
If you're going to buy a non-Apple phone, you might want to wait until the week of Black Friday, right? You could start shopping as early as the Monday before Thanksgiving, and there will be deals out there. And I would guess that if you're going to buy a non-iPhone, there's probably a person in your life asking for a specific phone. So find out which one they want because they will have an allegiance. I think that it is very rare for somebody to be saying, hey, I just want a generic Android phone.
Right.
But if you are shopping for something like a Pixel, give it a couple weeks, know exactly what you want, and then, like you said, do smart shopping. But I think much past Thanksgiving, you're not going to find a lot of phone deals that you haven't already heard of.
Mm-hmm.
So you are a smart home expert. CNET has at least one smart home where you guys get to test all kinds of fancy stuff. What do you recommend? What do you recommend buying for your family or friends or other people on your list, smart home stuff wise?
Well, it depends on so it's interesting. Smart home is one of those categories that there are a few people who are going to be like, I'm just into the smart home and I want to have everything for the smart home. But the reality of the smart home is buy them products that match their interests. So outside of the smart assistants and the assistant ready speakers, which most people probably already have at this point, find out whether the person you're buying a gift for is really into the kitchen, is really into their lighting, and then come into our guide and shop from there. We've got some really great recommendations for things like smart coffee makers. We've got the Instant Pot blender, which we actually really like. It's a blender that also cooks. Find out what they love and then go from there because I promise that if they're into home decorating or they're into fitness or they're into anything else, you're going to find a smart recommendation in the guide.
So I wish I could credit the person on Twitter who said this, but I don't remember. But they coined the term Alexorcism, which is getting all of the smart home devices out of your house because you can't stand to have them. I wish I came up with that term, but I did not. But I mean, there's a lot of people who are like reaching the end. My husband is one. And so
that must be tough for you.
It is tough. We're still married for now, but we'll see. So what do you recommend for like before you really get these kind of devices, the devices that might listen to you or track you in other ways? I mean, do you recommend buying these for people who don't already have them?
If they're asking for it, sure. I mean, I think there are a lot of people right now, if they don't already have, an Echo Home product, or they haven't tried Google Home, they might feel a little left out or want to know what it's all about. And the price point is going to get so low that for instance, the Dot or the Google Home Mini will probably, just like last year, end up on sale for $35. So it's not going to be cost prohibitive to get somebody into that world if they are curious about it. If they're kind of meh about it, there are so many products that do amazing things that you can buy that are not, their selling point is not about connecting to the internet. So Instant Pot is a good example of that. Any sort of sous vide maker, if somebody really likes to cook or is really especially into cooking meat or eggs, there are all kinds of interesting things you might not know you can do with kitchen devices that don't require an internet connection.
Yeah, the Innova sous vide maker is actually really great. We don't use it all the time, but it was totally a Christmas gift, I think, last year or the year before. And it was a big hit. It was a total surprise for my wife. And yeah, it's pretty awesome. So definitely look into that.
I think absolutely that's a good example. Or here's the other gift. If you have some money to spend, get your family a robot vacuum.
Oh, yes. Good.
That is life-changing.
Yeah.
$300. We are recommending this year the Eufy RoboVac 30C. They can collect, or they can connect, or you can control them via Alexa or Google. But really what you're buying is not having to vacuum your floor every day, or just having a clean floor if you're not the kind of person who's going to vacuum every day.
Yeah. I just hope my dog doesn't attack it when it's going around. That's my worry there. We'll see. I'll have to buy one and let you know how that goes. What can consumers do? Obviously, you have the holiday gift guide, so that's a great place for consumers to go to find this information. But what about like apps and assistance around like price drops? Because price drops happen very suddenly nowadays. I already kind of spoiled it a little bit. My favorite go-to is Slick Deals. But does CNET recommend any services that can kind of track these prices?
The two that I like to bring up most often are Honey and Camel.
Oh, yeah.
They do very similar things, but they track prices. They tell you about price history so that you can do research and see if something really is that different from the price it's been offered at in the past. They both take coupons, or take into consideration coupons, so track those for you. Make sure that you're not missing a chance to get a discount that you didn't know you could get if you're buying something already. So those are the two we most often recommend.
I love Honey. Like, Honey is one of those things where, like, I kept hearing about it by so many people, and it just looked it sounded scammy to me for some reason. And then someone on another podcast that I trust recommended it, and I downloaded it, and I love it. I mean, I'm sure that they are gathering all kinds of data about the stuff that I buy, but I don't care, because it's like at the point of purchase where they show you that you can save money, as opposed to like Slick Deals, which sends me, I mean, you can go to Slick Deals and say like, I want to buy this and this and this and tell me when it's cheaper. But I just like Honey, and it's so cute. It's got a little dancing coin of some kind that says, I've looked through all the deals and you're getting the best price. So I definitely second that recommendation.
It is sort of a peace of mind thing. I think that the internet is so fractured and our shopping experience has become so complicated. While it is sometimes easier to get things shipped to your home, we spend a lot of time second guessing our choices. And it's just nice to have that reassurance.
Absolutely. So your guide went up today. Where do you want to point people to find CNET's holiday gift guide for 2018? Well, even if they think it's a little early, November 1st. But hey, this is prime season.
It's not early, y'all. It's not. It's after. We had the classy good graces to wait until after Halloween.
Good. Thank you at least for that. Where should people go?
They should go to holiday.cnet.com.
Oh, that's
or
too
the
easy.
CNET app.
Yeah.
Either one.
And are there personal, like, do you have your list up there? Because sometimes I feel like when I read your tweets and Facebook posts that we're the same person. So do you have a list? Because I maybe just buy all that stuff.
I don't, but I should.
You should.
I should. Just buy all the things that CNET says. Okay. No, I'm kidding. We don't make money when you.
Okay.
We're not selling anything.
Okay. Right.
Except your awesomeness.
Yeah.
Lindsey Turrentine from CNET. Always great, Lindsey. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. We'll talk to you soon. Bye. All right. Finally, were you aware, Megan, that your iPhone hates helium?
My iPhone did not tell me that yet. Apparently, I haven't been around helium.
Yeah, well, there is that. Apparently, Morris Hospital in the Chicago area installed a new GE MRI machine. And in the process of the install, there was a helium leak that at first went undetected. Suddenly, throughout the hospital, newer model iPhones and Apple Watches were out of nowhere becoming inoperable, 40 of them to be exact. Meanwhile, Android devices and older iPhones continued plugging along. It turns out that Apple replaced bulky quartz components in its newer devices with micro electromechanical systems, timing oscillators, and that the helium molecules penetrated those MEMS chips and rendered the devices temporarily useless. Apple actually indicates in a section of its user guide to a warning against exposure to gases such as helium, which they say, quote, may damage or impair iPhone functionality. So this was obviously a big test of that. If this happens to you, Megan, ever, have no fear. It should be fully recoverable if you unplug the device and wait a week. Waiting a week might be hard for you.
What do I do about my Apple Watch? I can't unplug my Apple Watch. It's unplugged.
Good question. I don't know on that one. That's a good question.
I guess turn it off, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Just wait.
Yeah, I love that.
Wait a long time.
My favorite part of the story is that Apple's like, duh, we obviously knew.
It's in the manual.
Yeah.
You didn't read the helium section of the manual?
Also, it's like very high levels of helium we're talking about. Like if you just took a balloon and shot it at your, like a helium balloon, that wouldn't happen.
Although your iPhone would speak in really high voice. Possible.
Siri would be very high voice.
That'd be so great.
Siri.
When your iPhone detects that there's helium in the room, suddenly Siri is really high in her warning.
Yes. I found this on the web.
That would be awesome.
So I think that this much helium is bad for you.
Yeah.
Like just bad for you as a human too. So it's not like we're going to be experiencing this. But I highly recommend if you've got like 45 minutes to spare and then you really interested in like weird technology troubleshooting, check out the Reddit thread because it's like, you can go down that Reddit rabbit hole of like, well, I once found this and it was caused by this after we did this, this, and this. I don't know. I enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. And I should also point out that iFixit's Kyle Waynes, who we had on the show, I think last week or the week before, he has a blog post up on iFixit, and I think that was that raised a lot of awareness around this helium iPhone thing too. So the more you know about your iPhone, your new iPhone. Tech News Weekly records live every Thursday starting at 2:30 p.m. Pacific at twit.tv/live. You can be part of the show if you email us at tnw@twit.tv. And yeah, I realized I sounded like I had more to say there, but I don't.
I want to do the Siri helium voice again so badly, but subscribe to the show. Go to twit.tv/TNW. Tell your friends, too. That is a way that we can spread the word. You can do all the things. You can go ahead, write a review on Apple Podcasts if that's a thing that people still do. Do it. But also tell your friends, like, if you're interested in technology, you have a commute, or you like to kick back on the couch and watch podcasts on your Apple TV all about technology, tell your friends about that. And if you want to tweet at me about anything, I'm at Megan Maroney.
And I'm at Jason Howell. Tweet at me, too, although I might not see it for a little while. I'm kind of slow on Twitter these days.
It's okay. I'll tell you the important ones.
All right, cool.
If you need to talk to Jason, just email me. Talk to Jason, Leo,
This
Lisa.
is how it works
just email
now.
me.
I'm so embarrassed.
I'm the social media receptionist
Yes.
of Twit now. So.
I really appreciate it, Megan. Thank you. It's saving me a lot of grief and anxiety. Burke, Josh, Jammer B, Colleen, so many people help us every week do the show, and we really appreciate their efforts and help each and every week. And we appreciate you watching, because without you, what would we be? We'll see you next week on another episode of Tech News Weekly. Bye, everybody.